So today I will talk about WebSockets and the relevant issue in Qlik Sense. Before we start, please mute yourself. You can prepare the questions while listening and bring them up after this presentation. We will have a QA session in the end. Okay, let's start. My name is Vicky. I'm the product support engineer in Qlik APAC team. I've been with Qlik for 3 years. My main support products are Qlik Sense, Qlik View, Unprinting, and Qlik Geoanalytics. And my main support function areas is deployment and infrastructure. Well, here is today's agenda. I will explain what WebSockets are, how Qlik Sense are using them, and I will show you some typical issue for WebSockets in Qlik Sense, and also how we can troubleshoot them, as well as some possible solutions. Okay, let's begin. So WebSocket is a communication protocol over TCP layer between client web browser and the server. It provides a full duplicate channel over a single connection. So the data can be transmitted in both directions in a single carrier at the same time. When a WebSocket connection is initializing, the client sends a WebSocket handshake request with HTTP protocol. Then the server returns a handshake response. WebSocket handshake uses HTTP upgrade header to change this HTTP protocol to WebSocket. A communication channel is established. Each end can send and receive messages. This channel will stay on until one side closes the session. Once a WebSocket connection is up, as a Qlik Sense end user, you can receive the data from the server. Virtualizations are generated on the web browser. You can also make change in the document. The data is sent from the browser to the server. This two-way bidirectional connection improves the communication speed. WebSocket protocol uses WS or WSS prefix to indicate a WebSocket or WebSocket secret connection. So WebSocket it's quite a widely adapted knowledge. They are supported by most mainstream browsers like Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Internet Explorer, Firefox, and Safari. These are also support browser for Qlik Sense. So, but however, if you use some less popular browser for Qlik Sense, maybe for testing purpose, please make sure this browser supports WebSocket first. Well, you will find more introduction about WebSocket from internet. For example, it's a Wikipedia page. Our Qlik also has quite a few articles talking about WebSocket. I list two here. Okay. So next, I'm going to show you some common issues related to WebSocket in Qlik Sense. Well, this presentation is based on the past supported cases we received from our daily work. So we do get quite a few reports of this kind of issue. I believe you must be very familiar with some of the errors. Okay, let's look at the first one. Connection to Qlik engine failed for unspecified reason. Refresh your browser or contact your system administrator. If you do refresh this page, very likely you will get this pop-up again. This error is usually received when you open one app from Qlik Sense Hub, because that's when WebSockets connection are being established. Well, you should still be able to see the Hub page, but that's it. You won't be able to open any app due to this error. Okay, the next one looks quite similar, but this happens more often when you are browsing within one app. The connection gets cut off and this error pops up. Connection lost. Make sure Qlik Sense is running properly. But when you check a Qlik Sense service, they're all running, and you haven't reached the timeout settings in Qlik Sense yet. Well, since we are talking about a timeout setting, let me show you where they are in Qlik Sense. There are two places for timeout setting in Qlik Sense. The first is keep alive. You can find it in advanced proxy setting. This setting means the maximum timeout period for a single HTTP or HTTPS request before closing this connection. It's used to protect a Qlik Sense server from denial of service attack, DOS. If an ongoing request exceeds this period, Qlik Sense proxy will close the connection. The default value for this setting is 10 seconds. But if your network has slow speed and experience very often disconnections, you can choose to increase this value. Okay, let's move on to the next settings. So the other one is session inactivity timeout. You can find it in virtual proxy configuration page. It means the maximum period of time when inactivity before timeout. After this, the session is invalid and the user is logged out from the system. So some customers, they don't want to add it in this sheet. They just want to keep this dashboard open without any activity. The default value for session inactivity timeout is 30 minutes. Definitely you can increase to a larger value if you just want to keep this page open without any actual work. Okay. Let's come back to the WebSocket issue in Qlik Sense. This one, you may not see it that common because it happens only when the user using IE, Internet Explorer. So the whole scenario is you use IE to open Hub, then open one app, you go to data editor, data load editor with no problem. Now you open another app in a new tab, but within this same browser. And you decided to launch the data load editor as well. But you will see this connection list keep spinning and never loaded. This happened in IE only. Okay, these are most common issue we've seen in Qlik Sense. So since you know about that, now you will ask, how are we going to troubleshoot them? Or even better, how can we fix them? Okay. So the first thing we need to do is to identify this issue is caused by WebSocket. I list some approach, list from easiest to harder. So the easiest thing we can do is to open QMC. If you do see this previous error we found in Hub, because QMC does not use WebSocket, only Qlik Sense Hub does. So the next thing you can do, or we will ask you to check, is to log on Qlik Sense server directly, maybe remote desktop, to open Hub by using shortcut. You know the shortcut icon created by Qlik Sense installation. So by doing that, you can exclude all the extra nodes between the server and the client. Very likely you will see a working Hub on the server, and this issue only experienced on client machine. So one more thing we can try is to use different browsers. As I mentioned earlier, some issue can only be found in IE. So switching browser can help us identify if that browser contributed to this issue. Okay, so now let's move to some more complicated ones. Well, quite often, we will ask you to set up a Qlik Sense WebSocket connectivity tester. Well, it's not officially from Qlik, but it's still quite reliable, and we would recommend it. You can follow this instruction in this article to download this tool package from GitHub, and you import that into Qlik Sense content library. So after a few very simple setup, you will get a test link. You can open this link in client browser. If the WebSocket are all established, you will see this all green item. But if WebSocket are blocked in between, you will see some items are highlighted in red. Well, from my own experience, even it marks this particular item in red, it may not still easy to locate which part is wrong exactly. So you need to show this part to your network administrator to discuss about that. We can talk this part later in more details. Okay. So another tool we use very often is browser developer tool. Chrome, IE, or Firefox, they all have their own tool with slight difference. Usually you can press your F12 key on the keyboard to launch it. This kind of tool will capture the network activity. You can find which request or response fail and what error is received, essential. For example, I have one example list here. You can see the one I highlighted. It's a WebSocket connection. Here, WebSocket. Well, the status code looks good. It's green. But when you look closer, you see this size is 0, which means the data it received is 0, and the time it processed is pending. So definitely something is wrong with this WebSocket connection. Well, if you are already familiar with this browser developer tool, and you want to take one step further, Chrome has its own tool to capture more detail for network activity. Okay, okay, this one, this URL, Chrome Net Export, you can use this URL into Chrome browser while browsing Qlik Sense. It will also capture activity, and it will save this record into a local JSON file. After you finish recording, you can use a different URL, Netlog Viewer, to read this JSON file. And I can show you this example here. Well, here you go to that URL and read the JSON file, and you go to event and select a socket event. You will see here, it lists every single step about how this connection is established and what data is sent and received. You can see handshake message received, and the SSL certificate received, and the socket alive, some message like that. Well, similarly, some third-party tool can also help us achieve that. For example, network administrator must be very familiar with some tool like a Wireshark or Fiddler. We can also use them to track network activity. I have one example here. Well, in this case, the customer also experienced this very typical disconnection issue in Qlik Sense Hub. And he has a very specific network device connected as a reverse proxy. And it's working without this device. So he used Fiddler to capture the traffic using and not using this device. And he sent this file to us, and we open them to compare. Well, you can see here, I sorted all these files by URL. So what we are doing is comparing the same URL with or without this device. And you can see most of them look pretty much the same, except for this particular one. Well, you can see the working one, the WebSocket connection is established. It shows WS means the WebSocket. But the exact same URL with this device, it has this red exclamation mark. Well, if you look at the detail of this request, you will see here, 404 not found. If you look at this image closer, you will find actually other WebSocket actually working. You can see it's up and it's up. It happened to this particular WebSocket connection coming from this service, data prep service. So later on, we start to investigate why this particular URL was got blocked. Well, this is a quite long story. And this device is not very often seen, so I won't expand too much in this presentation. But this example shows you how you can narrow down among so many requests and find this breaking point. Okay. So now you are asked, how are we going to fix this issue? I know when you come to Qlik support, you will all expect us to give you a very solid solution to resolve the issue instantly. But when it comes to WebSocket, to be honest, there's not much related settings in Qlik Sense except for the following 2 points. Okay, let me show you. The first is a whitelist in QMC. When you first deploy a Qlik Sense server, you need to come here, this page, proxy, advanced whitelist. You need to configure your whitelist. You need to add all the alias or redirection address that user may use to reach the hub. It can be IPs, FQDN, for qualified domain name, the redirect URL from load balance or reverse proxy. Well, Qlik has one article to give you some best practice how to configure the whitelist. The other one is it's called the pin in the WebSocket pin interval. This was added from June 2018 release patch 1 by R&D as enhancement. So if you have earlier version and if you do want to apply this fix, you need to upgrade your Qlik Sense server first. So what does this setting do? So some network device like a firewall, it may cut off net connection if no activity is detected. It may force to close the idle connection. So this setting by default is turned off. You can see this value is 0. And when it's turned off, it means just working as normal. But if you want to enable this session, you just put a value here, change it to a larger value. So by doing that, Qlik proxy will send a ping, a WebSocket ping to the client every few seconds based on the value you add here. This is a proxy exe configuration file. So it will keep pinging the client to keep this connection alive, won't be cut by any network device. But you need to balance this value. If it's too large, it won't make any difference. This ping interval should be smaller than device idle time. If this value is too small, proxy will keep sending ping requests very frequently. So it may add extra loading into the network. So you may need to adjust this value to a balanced one. The recommended value is usually between 60 to 200. Oh, sorry, 300. Okay. Sometimes you may not notice this line in some earlier version. So you need to manually add this line. But I just found in later version it's already there, but by default it's turned off with this 0 value. Okay. So these are 2 things we can do within Qlik Sense. Other than that, this will be purely environmental. At this point, we will have limited control over it because each environment is quite different with all kinds of device, network device, and customized settings. You will need to get a network administrator or Windows administrator to investigate because they are the one who know this system or the network setup the best. So what could be any environmental factor causing this? The very basic point is to ensure the ports used by WebSocket are not blocked or taken by other process. Qlik Sense use these 2 ports for WebSocket, 4239 and 4949. These ports cannot be changed. Well, you can find all the required ports from Qlik help site, but surely we need to open all these ports on the server and any network device. But once we identify this issue is WebSocket blockage, these 2 ports will be our main focus to look at. So the next thing is apply for IE only. If you still remember the last issue I showed you, it happened specific in IE. That's because some limitation in Internet Explorer, which by default only allows 6 WebSockets for each connection. So you need to look at this article to edit one local policy to lift the limit. If the user must use IE. Okay. So last but not the least, after you check all the ports and after you make sure the browser supports WebSockets, we need to look at the whole network. Well, you need to find in this network what kind of network device actually blocking WebSockets. It can be firewall, load balance, reverse proxy, router, or any other device. Well, it's not an easy job, I have to say. It could take quite a while to just locate this device. Well, here I will share some little tips how we can locate this device. Okay, it's always good to get a network diagram about how the server is set up and how it's connected. It will give you a whole picture. And engage your network team in the early stage. Talk to the network team and involve them into your investigation. And when you access the issue, try to find the pattern. For example, when the connection gets cut off, how often does it happen? Every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes? Does it always happen maybe at home network or office network? So this will help us later locate the device or the settings. If possible, you can try to bypass or connect this device one by one until you reach the working or breaking point. So you will know the device you recently dealt with must have something wrong. And I can show you one example network diagram. It has quite a few devices connected: firewall, router, reverse proxy, load balance. And each of them could possibly block a WebSocket. So you can try to exclude or include them one by one. That's one of the approach. Okay. Well, I know for some client, you may not allow to do this kind of test in production. So if they have a dev or UAT environment with the same or identical infrastructure, you can test in this environment first. Well, if for some reason you couldn't get a network diagram, you can use the command trace route to find each hop. But I know it may not always work because this command could be blocked maybe by firewall or by the system. Also, sometimes the customer maybe have multiple office. It happened in maybe particular one. You can ask them to try to connect from different network or service carrier. Okay, so that's the example network diagram. Okay, so this is our last part, some possible settings or solutions. Well, please understand I cannot give you just one fix to resolve everything in this presentation, but these are very important areas we collect from our cases. So you need to pay more attention to these parts when this issue happens. The first is WebSocket enable or disable option. I know for most device, this option by default is turned on, but it's not always. So please make sure this protocol is allowed or enabled. The next thing you can check on this network device are timeout settings. It could be called timeout, times to leave, device idle, or any similar name like that. For example, some firewall cut off idle connection every 5 minutes. You can try to increase the timeout setting on firewall to a larger value. If the WebSocket disconnection just happened to particular request, like the example I show you in Fiddler, you can compare the package before and after this device. to find out if this network device does something unusual when passing the package. For example, does it add any extra header? Well, that's all for the presentation. I hope you enjoy it. Obviously, it won't cover every possibility in real life, but I hope my sharing today will give you a better understanding of WebSockets and make your troubleshooting easier or more efficient. And now it's the QA time. If you have any questions, you can type in chat areas. And just let you know, I may not answer all your questions, but we will take your questions and get back to later if we couldn't answer during this section. Okay.